I want to make a tiny holiday diorama for a festive animation short, but this won't just be any set. I'm going to be combining this stop motion set with 2D animation. This short is also a long time coming. I tried to complete this 2 years in a row, and as I did, I brought in my incredibly talented friends and family, and each year I failed. But this year, I'm committed. I don't want this project to join my long list of unfinished ventures, and I don't want to let all these amazing people down. So I'm going to cross my fingers and dive in. Let's go. When starting this project, the first thing I did, like always, is to make a Pinterest board for inspiration. After that, I draw a blueprint for the interior and exterior of the diorama, and then I can start making. Step 1 is cutting up my weirdly shaped foam boards into walls for my set. The reason I'm using foam is because they're great for adding texture, and in this case, I want to do a lot of brick texturing. To do that, I mark my measurements using a ruler, and I texture the walls with a variety of texturing tools. At first, I used a toothpick, then a pencil because I'm using 2 different types of foam, and the sound of the toothpick on the other type of foam was ear-splitting. Alright, after texturing the walls, it's time to cut out some strips of foam and texture them to be the strips of trim at the top of the set. After that, I hot glue the foam strips onto the set. Then I experiment with what I want the little squares to be, feeling like the foam squares might be a little too thick. At first, I tried 2 stirring sticks glued together, but I can hear them about to splinter. So instead, I opt for some thicker cardboard I had from a jewelry box I was planning on throwing out. After this, I cut out the window and door, saving the door cutout. Then I make the window, outlining the hole with popsicle sticks to give it a cleaner look, and struggling to get the window horizontal and vertical bits to stick. After that, I take my door cutout and use it to make a door out of foam. Then I texture it using a pencil. After I do that, I'll texture the door with an X-Acto knife. However, I will do this with a sheet of plastic on it. The reason I'm doing this is so the texturing won't be as extreme. The plastic kind of softens it. After that, I hot glue the door into place, and then I prop up the walls to see how it looks. Now it's time to paint. Before I do that, I'll mask off anything I don't want black paint on with painter's tape. Then I'll carefully paint a black base coat on the bricks. As I paint, I'll remember 2 other parts I forgot to mask, and I'll be super extra to not make any mistakes along the way. I'll paint a base coat on the interior room walls as well. While that's drying, let's make the other exterior walls. I textured them off camera, so let's cut out the window and door holes again, saving the door cutout. Then I'll complete the same process to make the door before. I'll outline the windows with stirring sticks and decide we're going to keep this one simple. I also decided to outline the door since I didn't have a rounded top. I forgot to do an important brick texturing step. You can do this with a rock or a rolled up piece of tinfoil. You take that rock or tinfoil and smash it against the foam. You're supposed to do this before painting, but I bet there will be no issues when I do this to my damp walls right now. Not to worry, I'll touch it up. Now let's finish the other exterior wall. I cut a strip of foam, hot glue it onto my last wall, and I'll reuse my old door cutout to make another door. I'll cut one more strip of foam and hot glue it to my set, and I'll rush to do a base coat before I have to leave for work. After I paint the other side of my walls, I quickly remember that the inside wall has another pattern, and I wipe away some paint and hope that my much lighter base coat will cover the black paint. It's time to improve the rush base coat I did before. I repaint the wall I made with a better color, but with the second wall I have an issue. I don't have any red paint, and I have a lot of red in my design. Another crafter might go and buy some paint, or even check to see if they have some downstairs, but not me. Instead, I tried combining what little orange I have with some chalk pastel, which doesn't really work since it's not ground well. Then I add some of that reddish powder I used in my barn making video. You should check it out. It's really awesome. I think that didn't really help too because I already had a bunch of clumps going on and it just seemed like a clumpy mess. So instead, I cover it with Mod Podge and I brush different shades of pastel onto it. I also literally draw chalk pastel on it and smudge it with my hands off camera. Then I dry brush white paint on it. I finished painting the other wall. And now it's time to add the secondary lighter color on my main wall. Carefully, I paint, getting it all over where I don't want it to be. I remember I'm supposed to have these light bands on the top and bottom of the wall, and I'm surprised to find that the light paint covers it very nicely. Now it's time to make the little flower box. I cut up more of that jewelry box into rectangles, and then I hot glue them together. Then I paint them the same light blue I used as my secondary color. And now it's time to make little painting frames out of stirring sticks. I hot glue them together and paint them that same light blue. Now it's time to color the window. I still haven't bought any red paint, so I'm going to use Copic markers. Alright, so I don't have red paint and I don't want to get it. So instead, I did some swatches of different materials I use. This bright red here seems to be the best red. I had to give it some time to dry. And it was with this Copic marker. It's actually funny because I used some other Copic markers and I feel like it was more semi-transparent and not as good. So let's do it. I also tested it out here and I like the way it looks. This is the red. And this one's like dead, so I want to see if I can figure out how to fix it. I know you can I'm pretty sure you can put more ink in like Copic markers, but I don't know how. I never did it before. And then also this is the pastels I used. It didn't work at all. It like scratched it up if I pressed too hard, and then it was very faint. So I color the door, doing my best to layer things in a way that doesn't create streaks. In the end, I'm very happy, but I gotta do my best not to touch it since it's still sticky. Then I touch up the blacks, elevate it on my pastel box so I can avoid the door being touched. Finally, it's time to do some dry brushing. I start by dry brushing a gray and then a blue on the bricks. I repeat the same process on the other side of the wall. I'll also dry brush some white on the light blue paint. Then I dry brush the red door and the windows black. Then we hot glue them together, and now it's time to make the interior floor. I'll trace a square on a piece of cardboard using the walls of my interior as reference. Then I'll cut out the cardboard floor. I glue some foam on the cardboard, again using my wall as reference, my plan being to texture the floors to look like wood, a technique I used in my barn video. But then I start to think it looks a little thick, and it might be best to just use popsicle sticks instead. So I struggle to take off the foam. At first, I really want to save it, but then it becomes clear it wasn't happening. In a split-second decision, I decide to hot glue the floor to the walls, hoping I can avoid getting any paint on the interior walls. After that, I take the incredibly tedious process of counting how many stirring sticks I need. I cut up the stirring sticks. Then, after an annoying amount of time, I paint the ground the same base coat I plan to use on the floorboards, so I don't have to worry about the cardboard peeking through. I paint the stirring sticks a gray base coat, then I hot glue the stirring sticks onto the floor. In the future, I'd use some tacky glue, pretty much any glue that isn't hot glue, because I notice as I go some of the stirring sticks are crooked, and I ended up having to cut some strange shaped sticks to make it all work out. But if I used, say, Mod Podge, I can just replace it as I go, because it's not immediately drying and sealing the stirring stick to the cardboard. Next, I paint the doors and windows with a base coat on my other exterior walls. I also paint the top piece. Now it's time to add a nice strip of paint using painter's tape. Then I dry brush the gray doors and windowsill with black paint. I cut off the excess floorboard. I remove the little stringy bits left from the glue gun. Then I cover the floorboards with another gray base coat. I dry brush the floorboards with black, then I cover it with some glossy Mod Podge since I want this nice glossy wooden floor feel. I wipe off some excess as it continues to dry because I don't want it to be too glossy though. At some point in the process, I should mention that the painter's tape ripped off the paint off the foam and I'd have to paint it again, and I just settle with one base coat. I cut out the store names using a Cricut machine, which lets you cut out lettering at a variety of different sizes. This makes the process incredibly easy to get great looking letter cutouts, and I can't believe I was considering hand cutting it out myself. I also cut out a strip of paper to glue the soy may to using Mod Podge. Then I cut out a bigger strip of paper and glue the green rectangle to that, giving it a nice lining. I glue the other lettering down, and now it's time to make a little stage. I start by cutting up a mini cereal box, taping them together with masking tape so it's a little rectangle. Now it's time to hot glue the stirring sticks all over the cardboard stage. I start to color it with Copic markers, then I realize I need to cut off the excess cardboard, and then I finish coloring it. I brush it with some darker browns, I glued in place, and now it's time to attach the exterior walls with some hot glue and masking tape. Now it's time to make some little paintings. I start with sketching an idea, then I reference some past drawings to help me with the composition, using the painting frame to help guide me. Next, I trace the artwork with the Faber-Castell black fine liner. I color them in with Copic markers, then I retrace the drawing with the black Copic markers because it just didn't feel dark enough, and color in the background. I cut them out off camera and hot glue them into their frames. Now it's time to make itty bitty flowers, which I will struggle with. To do this, you cut out a strip of paper, then you cut vertical cuts along it, then roll it up and hot glue it, and now it's time to cut out petals and hot glue them to it. And then we got a pretty flower. I'll make some more flowers, then we color them with Copic markers using darker oranges. I hot glue them into a flower box, and now it's time to do the sidewalk. I decide to keep it simple, cutting strips of cardboard to be the sidewalk base. I use the first cardboard strip as a way to make sure the other two are roughly the same size by taping a bigger piece of cardboard to my strip and cutting off the excess. I tape the cardboard pieces together. Next, I cut some smaller strips, taping it to a ruler to get a straight edge, and then I tape those pieces together and I hot glue them to the cardboard. Then I color the sidewalk with this pinkish Copic marker. Off camera, I use hot glue and masking tape to attach the cardboard sidewalk to my holiday diorama. And now it's time to hot glue little beads onto the door to act as doorknobs. Now it's time to make a plan. I followed one of Queen City Mini's amazing videos. I start by coloring this pale yellow sheet of paper with a variety of Copic markers. I cut leaf shapes out of the paper. I remember I need to color the other side. I draw brown stems on the leaves. Then I begin making a series of diagonal cuts down the leaves. Then I'll hot glue the leaf into the bead using it as a flower pot. I repeat this step until I get all of the leaves in, and I curl them as I go, really wishing I knew where my tweezers are right now because they make things like this easier. I brush some black wash onto the plant, and then I'll attach it to the interior of my set off camera. Now it's time to make a fake Christmas tree, something I've been dreading. The tree was inspired by Art37's video, but I made some changes based on material I had at hand. I start by cutting 2 stirring sticks the same size, then I hot glue toothpicks going down. Then I'll hot glue the other stirring stick on top of it like a sandwich. I trim the toothpicks, giving it a more Christmas tree triangle shape. I glue on additional toothpicks on the stir sticks, and then I trim the toothpicks as well, giving it that same triangle look. Next, I'll color with the Copic markers because I don't want to use paint. Next, I'll cover with Mod Podge, and now it's time to cover my tree base in some flocking, which is basically fake grass people use in miniature sets. Next, I'll spray it with some flocking glue and cover it with this shrubbery stuff my mom gave me, and I'll trim this tree, add some more, and now I have a happy little Christmas tree. And yes, regardless of this plate, this stuff got everywhere. I had to take off my PJs and shake them off in the bathtub before I continued. Anyway, I glue the Christmas tree into the bead and attach it to the set off camera. Now it's time for a little inventive trick to make some Christmas lights. The trick was based off something I did in making a terrifying barn from cardboard and paint. In the video, I make little puddles of hot glue, then I color them to be chemical spills. The idea is the same, instead I'll be making little hot glue beads on paper, peeling them off, hot gluing them onto string, careful not to melt them. Then I'll attach them with hot glue and color them with Copic markers, and ta-da! I have some lights. Don't let my summary fool you though, this took an annoying amount of time, but I'm so happy with the results. Only 2 more steps to go, snow and dirt. Let Art Find You's video really help me out with this, even though he didn't use measurements. He combines baking powder, Mod Podge, and paint until you have this nice creamy mixture you can use for snow. I made this, but I also made a small amount that I colored brown with brown paint, and this reddish powder I used in the barn video, and I used it for dirt in the flower pot. I put it in there carefully. Next, I smear snow all over the set. At one point, I tried to make some footprints with little stirring sticks, but that ends up mostly being covered because later off camera I'll decide my diorama seems a little lacking in snow, and I'll fish the cup out of the garbage and add more snow to it. After that, you're supposed to expose it to some heat to let it fluff up and become more snow-like. I don't believe Let Art Find You says a specific amount of time, but it doesn't seem to take too long. However, he does caution you to not hold it too close or it can melt. The snow sets fully, I think, after 10 hours, but after some time, it's already nice and I've got some beautiful looking snow. I used my space heater to fluff it up, but he said you can use a heat gun or a hairdryer. Now it's time to show the final reveal. I'm looking at the set right now and I'm really happy with how it turned out. The snow looks great. It really looks fluffy and light and like snow. I really love the Christmas tree. It didn't take nearly as long as I thought it would take to make. It was a little annoying, I'll admit, it was. But I think it really turned out well. It's just I'm gonna keep getting better. I'm really excited to see how this thing turns out, and I hope you guys like this video. Next week, I'll release my holiday short I made using this festive diorama, but until then, check out my first mini house I made with an illuminating surprise. But before you go, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop a like, and if you want to show some extra support, consider joining my Patreon. You'll get access to high-resolution PNGs of behind-the-scene art, time-lapses of set art, your name at the end of the video, and more. Speaking of, it's time to thank my spooky and salty patron who helped me maintain my eerie but briny vibe with arcane trinkets, crafted from spectral energy and hot glue. With that, I will retire to my corpse-like slumber. Until next time, bye.